You'll have noticed in the top left of the plugin, there's a sidechain section, which so far I haven't really utilized or explained. Most compressors give you a high pass filter and call it a day, but the IPA 25 goes further, a lot further. This is a full sidechain EQ with link filters so you can choose which events are linked, transients, sustain, or mid-rate signals. This is worth getting to know because it can have a drastic effect on the compression, or more accurately, what the detector in the compressor is being given. You'll see in the bottom of the plugin window, right in the center, there's the sidechain section with the link control as well as shape and punch buttons. This is based on familiar favorites from the original hardware unit, so let's understand these through listening to a mix with different punch settings enabled. Normal is flat, standard compression, with the detector just being fed the entire signal. Loud reshapes the signal being fed into the detector by emphasizing highs and de-emphasizing lows. This essentially means that the compressor is not going to be as heavy on low frequencies and will smooth the high frequencies more. It actually emphasizes highs at around 3 dB per octave, which avoids low frequency dominance and brings it more in line with a pink noise balance. There's a long-standing idea in mixing that the ideal spectrum of a balanced mix resembles pink noise, which has a smooth downward slope of about -3 dB per octave. Loud punch mode flips that, introducing an upward slope of about +3 dB in the detector. The result is that the compression reacts in a way that nudges the mix more towards that pink noise balance, tighter, clearer, and more consistent across playback systems. It's not a shortcut to a perfect mix, but it's a big part of why the original hardware earned its reputation for sounding so alive and punchy. Mid is kind of the best of both worlds and sits somewhere in between the two. It has the same shape as the loud mode, but just not as much. Check out as I switch between loud, normal, and mid on a full mix. Loud isn't focusing compression on the low frequency elements, it's more about the snare and the vocal, so the kick doesn't dominate and cause a load of gain reduction unduly. Normal feels more weighted by the bass, it's listening to the full mix, so that kick and bass will come back a little. Mid is a subtle balance shift where mid frequencies steer the groove, but importantly the compressor still isn't triggered quite so much by the low end. Check it out, I'll set the link to 100% here. You can take this one step further by essentially drawing in a frequency curve in the sidechain filter. So maybe you have a frequency range dominated by the snare that you particularly do or don't want compressed. If you zone a curve in on the snare frequency, you can bring that curve up to feed more into the detector, which will compress that snare more, or notch the frequency out so the detector doesn't hear that snare quite as much. On the original hardware unit, you have link control, which determines essentially how much the compression on the left channel is governed by what's happening in the right and vice versa. As on most compressors, you can link the gain reduction across both left and right channels. On the IPA 25, that's achieved by setting the link to 100%. But you can also make the gain reduction independent by setting the link to 0%. This essentially turns the compressor into dual mono, also useful for mid-side processing, so the kick and snare in the center aren't triggering compression in the sides. But you can also set intermediate values, so it sits somewhere in the middle if you don't want it to be completely linked or unlinked. But it's actually more than that. The link filters play a huge part in what's being linked. So when you engage the filter, you have 3 different modes: band pass, high pass, and low pass. With no filter engaged, the link amount set by the knob applies continuously to all gain reduction. In high pass, Linking applies mostly to transient gain reduction. Fast changes on one channel, such as those caused by percussive elements and fast attack release settings, are mirrored on the other channel, while sustained gain reduction is not affected. In low pass, linking applies mainly to the sustained gain reduction. If one channel triggers a stable gain reduction, lasting several hundred milliseconds or more, this reduction is mirrored on the other channel. Conversely, the linking is much reduced on transients. In bandpass, linking applies to mid-range gain reduction events, between fast transients and long sustained levels. These filters are all there to give you complete control over what the compressor reacts to, separate from the traditional attack-release ratio and threshold controls. You can keep all those controls the same and just alter the sidechain controls to give you an entirely different compression sound. Once you hit punch control and go to loud, you'll instantly feel the mix tighten, and you can really adjust these filters until you get the perfect sound.